Biology students, we're moving into week 15 and we are going to switch from cognition to learning. And if you can think back to that timeline we did at the beginning of the year, it's kind of funny that they present it this way because the behaviorists, which is, well, if you remember these names, Skinner, Pavlov, and Bandura, the behaviorists actually came before the cognitive psychologists. So when we talk about learning, we are going to remember that we're talking about observable behavior. And so what I want to do in class today, I want to quickly look through, or in this video today, is quickly look through what are we doing between now and winter break, because we only have 2 weeks left. It's really important that you bring out how you already understand this word learning, because we use it so much. I find it absolutely fascinating. In Hungarian, there is no word for memorize. There's only a word for learning. So my children are constantly telling me that they're learning something, and I'm saying, well, aren't you just memorizing it? And they're like, but it's the same thing, right? And I hope by at the end of this lesson, you'll see that what a psychologist means by learning is not necessarily what we talked about when we discussed memory. So let's quickly look at the course page, and I'm going to look at the College Board page with you. So we have week 15, which we're going to look at different kinds of learning, and week 16, we wrap up learning. Learning is pretty short, all right? And the reason I picked learning is because it fits really nice in these 2 weeks. So if you look at the College Board page, you'll see we are on Unit 3, and it is development and learning. And if you notice, they start with development, and then these last 3 things are learning. And I didn't want to start development, stop for winter break, and then come back to it. So I thought, hey, this fits a lot better. We can fit the second half of this learning. And then when we come back from winter break, we're going to look at development. So this week 15, you're going to look at these different kinds of learning. We're going to get an overview today, because I really think it's important to have a big picture of what you're doing before you start. I always start that way. So you'll notice that there is a forum here, What is Learning? You can access this right now. So I want you to stop the video before you go any further. Go to the What is Learning forum. I actually put the directions in 2 places. So what I want you to do is, first, we use this word so much. So take some time to discuss what learning means to you. Describe how you learn. Make sure to give some examples of what is learning and what it is not, right? And then that's your first posting. So posting 1 stops there. After you go through this lesson, and I have my video plus a different one this week, come back and explain some misconceptions you had about the term learning, right? How do psychologists define learning? How is this different than how you initially defined it? And then I'm also interested, once you know how psychologists define the term learning, discuss whether or not you think computers or AI, it's kind of generic using computers, but do they learn according to how psychologists define learning? Right, so that's the discussion. So go ahead and pause this video now and go do the discussion posting. What does learning mean to you? How do you learn? Some examples of what learning is and what learning is not. And then when you're finished, just come back and we'll keep going with the video. So I think here, this is kind of a good place to start. Is it learning or is it not? So which of the following describes learning taking place, which do not? Explain why you think learning is or is not taking place in each of these situations. So, and if you need to pause so that you write your answers in, you can. The cessation, meaning the stopping of thumb sucking in an infant. The acquisition, which means the gaining of language in children. A computer program generates random opening moves for the first 100 chess games and tabulates the outcome of those games. Starting with the 101st game, the computer uses those tabulations to influence its choices of opening moves. A woman is placed in a tea maze. The left arm of the maze is brightly lit and dry. The right arm is dim and moist. Sorry, a worm, not a woman. Did I say woman? I don't remember what I said, but let's go back. A worm is placed in a tea maze. The left arm of the maze is brightly lit and dry. The right arm is dim and moist. On the first 10 trials, the worm turns right 7 times. Of the next 10 trials, the worm turns right all 10 times. 5. Ethel stays up late the night before the October GRE administration and consumes large quantities of licit and illicit pharmacological agents. Her combined verbal plus quantitative score is 410. The night before the December GRE, she goes to bed early after a wholesome dinner and a glass of milk. Her score is 1210. Is the change in scores due to learning? Is the change in pretest regimen due to learning? 6. After a previously psychotic patient is given Dr. K's patented pharmacological surgery, so some sort of surgery on the brain, and no longer exhibits any psychotic behaviors. Is that learning? A lanky zinnia plant is pinched back and begins to grow denser foliage and flower. Is it learning? Mycin is a computer program that does a rather good job at diagnosing human infections by consulting a large database of rules it is given. If we add another rule to the database, has MSIN learned something? 9. After pondering over a difficult puzzle for hours, Jane finally figures it out. From that point on, she can solve all similar puzzles in the time it takes her to read them. After 30 years of smoking 2 packs a day, Zeb throws away his cigarettes and never smokes again. All right, so let's see, what do we think here? So the cessation of thumb sucking, right? So this is not learning because I would say there's just no feedback given, right? We're kind of lacking evidence. And these are the things that my students said in a live class. So the notes that are here are from other students. All right, acquisition of language, probably learning, right? People use words, help you lose them. The word acquisition is kind of helping us see that there is feedback going on. Right? So it's practice. So everybody agreed kind of that this was an example of learning, right? It's using past things to influence future moves. All right, so learning changes behavior is what they said here. So we had a behavior change. So learning. Ethel staying up, not learning, right? Because I hope you kind of see this was maybe that state-dependent learning. We don't know anything, or not the state-dependent memory, right? That memory is not as good because she was using drugs the night before she did it. All right, a previously psychotic patient, not learning, right? We did some sort of change to the brain. This one's interesting, right? It's the biology, right? If I pinch a plant back, it's going to grow. It didn't learn to do anything differently. All right, machine learning. So all the students, I'm not going to talk about this too much because it's part of the discussion, right? Of after you discuss everything, how would we decide, is it learning or not? Puzzling, right? This brings us back to this idea as this cognition, right? Did she think through something? Or was there some aspect of, reinforcement? We're going to see reinforcement of ideas is going to influence what we say is learning or not. And everybody, the 10 has nothing because everybody said, well, it really depends on why he threw those cigarettes away, right? So that we can't quite tell whether it's learning or not. And you'll see as you move through the definition of learning today that each of these could be argued in different ways. It comes back to most of what we're doing, we don't always have right and wrong answers. All right, so let's look at the official definition from your book, from authors Hilgard and Bauer. Learning refers to a relatively permanent change in a subject's behavior to a given situation brought about by his or her repeated experiences in that situation, provided the behavior change cannot be explained on the basis of native responsive tendencies, maturation, or temporary states of the subject, right? So that last part is really important. The behavior change, natural response tendencies, right? That's your genetic. The plant example, right? The plant didn't learn it. That's the plant's natural response to being cut back, right? Sometimes maturation, right? we have a hard time, like you can't do something and then you can, is not necessarily that you learned it. Although most things with humans involve, like if I say learning to walk, there is some feedback there in terms of falling down, getting back up, and you go from crawling to walking, and that's a pretty permanent change of behaviors. But do pay attention here how it's a permanent change in the subject's behavior, meaning it's something we can measure. This is really important, where when we talk about cognition and memory and thinking, we don't always talk about it in terms of measuring what the subject does. And the behaviorists, they kind of own the term learning, and it really is about what we can measure. So this is in your discussion. And the last part, today's class is pretty easy, or my video is pretty short, is this is posted. I want you to get an overview. You're going to spend a day on classical conditioning. You're going to spend a day on operant conditioning, and you're going to spend a day learning on social learning, or also observational learning. I've posted this video on how to train a brain, and I just want you to have the main definitions, not all the details, some examples of each type, and the people that you're watching for. So what you're going to turn in with this video is this concept map, and you'll have the discussion done. All right, and this is kind of gets us into what we're going to do over the next 2 weeks. If you have questions and concerns, please send them to me.